Hi, and welcome to my dream classroom. I chose this design because of the relevance to the English classroom. The final product, the classroom that everyone sees, is just the tip of the iceberg for what exactly goes into a functioning classroom, pedagogy, etc. To begin, I'd like to start with my foundation. The aim of this classroom is to support students in becoming articulate, confident, creative, and refined writers. Students will feel empowered to reflect on their internal and external environments in a range of mediums. When I was creating this aim, I found that I was really drawn to multimodality, particularly in a time of growing graphic novels, and I didn't want to exclude any students from expression, refinement, drafting, process writing, just because it doesn't fit into the brick and mortar essay writing or novel writing or poetry. Secondly, I'd like to begin talking about theory. So for this, I mainly focused on developing writing teachers by Locke and Charged with Meaning. To begin, we focus on the most important part of the writing classroom, which is writing. So I'd like to begin with pre-writing. Locke discusses pre-writing quite extensively in his text. Two quotes that particularly stuck out to me were, "Involving students in inquiry-based learning sharpens the focus of their pre-writing," and I asked how many students felt they'd be more efficient at the brainstorming task had they been using pencil and pen. All said yes. So I took these quotes and I brought it into my personal philosophy through different classroom activities. So with inquiry-based learning, I plan on giving students journals to continually reflect on the media, their experiences, and really draw out questions that they can answer in their own writing. But this inquiry can also be maintained in the classroom. For example, free writing prompts or particularly creative writing tasks. For example, in seminar for English Education B, we used the first line of a poem to begin inspiration for writing, and everyone took it in a completely different direction, whether it was prose, reflection, poetry. And I think that inquiry is really important for students to just be comfortable in the act of writing. Now, in the second quote, Locke discusses physical pencil and pen to paper in terms of brainstorming. And I completely agree with this. I believe that to brainstorm properly, you need to be able to scribble and you need to be able to write freely as ideas come. And therefore, this section of pre-writing, I will have students work in pencil and pen. Then we begin the second section of drafting. So Locke focuses on two different aspects of drafting. One is prioritizing, and the other is using writing frames. This can create focus for students that I firmly believe is needed without interfering with their ideas, their inspiration, and their inquiry-based learning. Locke discusses prioritizing as directing students into focusing on a certain aspect of their writing. So, for example, if I were to set a writing assessment and I wanted students to focus on sensory-based learning, I would continually be asking rhetorical questions such as, what does it smell like in that setting? How's the weather in that setting? Is it musty? Is it fresh? Is it spring? Is it winter? How is this affecting the way that the reader feels? Another way to focus students within their writing is by using writing frames. And we can frame writing in many different ways. but the main one is using skeleton type outlines that help students to organize their thoughts without necessarily changing them, but it just provides more structure. Then we go on to collaboration. For collaboration, in Charged with Meaning, we are met with 3 different points. So there's revision versus revisioning, and I think that this is very important, but we'll just discuss it just a bit later. The second point is teach them a routine for how to run group conferences, and the third is emotional considerations. So firstly, I really enjoyed what Charged with Meaning talked about when they were talking about revision versus revisioning. Charged with Meaning basically differentiated them as revision is the skills-based, syntax, grammar, spelling, and such. Revisioning is the changing of the idea, not completely necessarily, but changing large portions of the idea. And by differentiating these two, it creates a different connotation to revision as not necessarily being a scary thing, as my idea is going to be shot down, it's going to be dissected with a red pen, and that's ultimately not what I'm after in my classroom. I'm after a very supportive environment, and I believe that students can help each other mainly in the revisioning, but also perhaps a bit in the revision. And this brings us to our second point. Teach them a routine for how to run group conferences. Group conferences are important both so that students are able to take feedback, but also able to give feedback. And this is ultimately a life skill that's very important. Being able to respectfully point out opportunities for growth, while also just really acknowledging the effort and the courage it takes to share a piece with your peers. And this brings us to our third point, emotional considerations. With the emotional aspects to writing and how vulnerable and personal it is very important to take in consideration that some students may not want to share their work, or they may want to share a different piece of work. And I believe that ultimately students should be able to opt out or pick a secure partner that they feel comfortable sharing with, and not having to share if they do not feel it's appropriate. And then we move on to, we move on to publication. Now, I believe that it's important that students feel that they have a goal that they're working towards, as opposed to just, quote-unquote, writing. Publication allows students to see the process through from pre-writing to publication, and every step in between. And this publication will allow students to have a sense of achievement. As Locke discusses, give students control over which work they wish to submit if there's an assessment goal. And for publication, in my dream classroom, I would like to do 2 separate things. Firstly, I would like to have spoken word poetry nights, as that's something that I had as a young student, and it greatly improved my speaking skills, my confidence in my poetry, and also my confidence with my peers. It allowed me to create a dialogue with peers that I wouldn't necessarily speak with. And the achievement that you feel after publishing, whether in a classroom magazine, which I would also like to start, or the spoken word poetry night, it's still an achievement, and it's something to be proud of regardless. Then we move on to curriculum. The classroom is comprised of Year 12 students. The Year 12 curriculum has a strong focus on text and reading. However, this class aims to seamlessly intertwine the 2 focuses. Analysis of text makes up the main focus of Australian curriculum. For example, undertaking close analysis of texts, examining how each text relates to a particular context or contexts, comparing the context in which texts are created and received. However, I don't believe that these text-based curriculum points need to be separate from writing. For example, reflective journaling for the close analysis of texts, or examining how texts, for example, how their text relates to another text, or how two texts can somehow have common themes, and this gets them talking about themes that they can use in their own work. Then we have writing, and these are just some of the points for the curriculum requirements of writing. We would mainly be focusing on synthesizing ideas and opinions to develop complex argument, if we were doing persuasive writing, using appropriate language and stylistic features to sustain a personal voice and point of view. I believe that would be the main one, is being able to maintain personal voice and point of view. And lastly, the challenges. Does assessment truly assess the curriculum points? As Emily Frawley says, in Victoria, the skills of aesthetic appreciation and editing are not directly assessed in either the school-assessed coursework or the Year 12 examination. And Frawley raises some great points in this. However, I believe that we can add this into school-based assessment. I don't believe that the Year 12 examination will add into it, but, for example, you can incorporate aesthetic appreciation by having students reimagine scenes from a novel. For example, Daisy Buchanan staring at the green light in Great Gatsby. What could you do to change that scene, to change the mood, to change the motifs? What if it was set somewhere else? And things such as this that really get students understanding that setting is aesthetic and appreciating every word that the writer has put out, and also being able to connect with that and emulate that for analysis. Editing skills are not directly assessed. However, being able to produce a piece of refined work is very important. And I believe that by having students engage in written peer reflection that can potentially be assessed if needed for school-assessed coursework, I believe that it's a very important part just as a life skill and should be added more into school-assessed coursework. Now we would move on to pedagogy. So my teaching strategies that I really wanted to focus on in my classroom were facilitating flow, authentic personality teaching, the use of wide reading, and hook writing activities. Assessment strategies include revision of work as an accessible aspect of the class and publication. So flow is defined as deep engagement in an activity leading to a sense of timelessness. I believe that flow within creative writing allows students to have the chance to really explore and really relax into their writing. And so my classroom really reflects relaxation, the ability to concentrate, different learning styles met with different learning settings, which we'll see later on in my class diagram. Class activities. So students will be given a journal to discuss the media they're consuming, as previously discussed. Prompts given in the beginning of the lesson, much like what I discussed in seminar for this class. Workshopping skills and content, so workshopping skills in terms of syntax, grammar, etc., and content in terms of what students should be talking about. As discussed before, the open mic nights in the class magazine. Locke says, in a rich writing classroom, students will write often, they will write extended texts, and they will write to learn, to explore, and to reflect, as well as to demonstrate what they've learned. So what I really enjoyed about this quote was that Locke put demonstrate what they've learned as the last priority, that them writing to explore and reflect was more important, and I truly believe that that's what makes a successful writing classroom. Finally, for this one, we have assessment. Frawley discusses that the key belief espoused by teachers being that there is time to do creative writing in the pre-VCE years, but once students are in VCE, teachers, quote-unquote, don't have the luxury. Now, again, Frawley brings up an excellent point about how we fit this into the curriculum. And it's a challenging point. I do believe that you can add cross-curricular aspects. For example, writing creatively on a text that you're studying, or writing creatively to begin persuasive writing for an oral presentation. And I think that this is ultimately how we'd have to go about it, just based on how VCE is set up. But I don't believe that you don't have the luxury to write. Writing is always available. And then finally, we have the final product, which is the classroom. So here's my class diagram, and I'll just run you through this. This is the whiteboards for both student and staff use, and then we have our collaboration tables. These collaboration tables are very important for revising and revisioning. I have also included some standing desks for students who need to stand, who feel more at ease when they're standing, basically. But I would only allow the standing desks, particularly during drafting periods and not during collaboration periods. Down here is just my desk, and to the side over here is a beanbag section, and this is ultimately for wide reading from the library. And this just allows students a more relaxed setting for collaboration, a bit more informal, and as well allows them to be comfortable as they're wide reading. I've also set up a coffee station with tea, coffee, Milo, and such to really promote that flow, that relaxation, and feel as though we're all equals, we're all together in this writing. So I've written a poem as to express both my love of writing and show modeling, but also to just give you a quick snapshot. So I'll begin. They sit, they lay, they stand, listening to their favorite band. The room smells of coffee. Students talk softly. This is my writing classroom. It's the books we consume. We write ourselves. Or magical elves. This is my writing classroom, where writing is not met with gloom, where voices boom to tell their story without worry. This is my writing classroom, where we are a team building self-esteem. I write from the heart, instilling writing, drawing, and acting as an art. This is my writing classroom. And finally, we have the lesson plan. So a sample of my lesson plan is 10 minutes of a hook activity, a prompt, writing, and this is just a touch base to get students to begin writing. The middle section of my lesson plan would be facilitating one-on-one and collaborative discussions during their drafting, and students would be continuing drafting and revising and revisioning within their groups. And finally, I would have one-on-one discussions to ensure that students were completing appropriate to the task and appropriate to the prompt. And there you have my dream writing classroom. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.